In this video I'll be talking about WD Gann's most famous trade. It's famous because it was mentioned in the Ticker interview in 1910, and there's a lot of references to it on the internet. This is when Gann not only predicted the date but also the price the week contract would hit. This video is part 3 of an ongoing series looking at WD Gann's most famous trades. I'll be demonstrating how Gann made those trades using planet cycles, and I'll show you how to apply the same techniques to the markets you follow. Please subscribe to get notified when new videos come out. But first of all, I need to talk about some of the background work and research that needs to be done before you can even start looking at Gann's techniques. Now this is an ephemeris file. Now along the top you'll see a number of symbols, so you need to get to know what these symbols mean, and they represent the planets. Now there can be different symbols representing the same planet depending on the source of your information, so you've got to keep a lookout for that. Now on day 1, the top row, you'll see more symbols. Now these represent the signs, so you need to know which symbol represents each sign, and also there can be a number of symbols for one sign depending on the source, so you need to familiarize yourself with them. Now if you think of the sky as a circle, and of course a circle is 360 degrees, well, if you cut it up into 12 equal segments, in simple terms like a 12-piece pizza, there's one sign for each segment, and they have familiar names. But what we're talking about here is mundane astrology, which is astrology that affects normal everyday things like business, and in this case the stock market. So each segment or piece is 30 degrees, there's 12 signs, so 12 times 30 is 360 degrees, which makes up the circle. Now in addition to knowing the planet symbols and names, knowing the sign symbol and names, you need to know where each sign starts. So we've got Jupiter in Aquarius, and Aquarius starts at 300 degrees, and we've got Neptune in Cancer, and Cancer starts at 90 degrees, for example. Now if you look on here on day 1, so it's August the 1st 1902, so Jupiter is at 12 degrees 56 minutes Aquarius. Now the minutes go to 60 and then it will tick around to 13 degrees, and for our purposes you can round up or down, that's fine. So you need to add 1256, or let's call it 13 degrees to 300. Now these are the actual degrees that the planets are on the first day of August 1902. Now that's just line 1, so imagine working this out for every line. Now what you'll see is the slower moving planets like Jupiter and Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, if you go down you'll see there's only small changes, they're slow moving, so there's not much change day to day. But if you look at the Sun and the Moon, and even some of the faster moving planets like Mercury, Venus and Mars, they move quite quickly, so you probably do need to calculate these most days, if not every day. Now what you've got to do is you've got to look at the aspects between the planets. So for example, you'd need to take 293 minus 116. Now that's a few degrees off 180, but essentially 180 degrees is opposite, and that's considered a negative aspect. Another one here, we've got Jupiter and the Sun. So 313 minus 128 makes it opposite. And again, it's within a few degrees. And that's called the orb. And what I've found is taking an orb plus or minus about 6 degrees seems to work quite well. If it's too tight, you might miss stuff, and if it's too wide, you've got too much to look at. Now, that would take hundreds of calculations. So you'd not only need to know your planet symbols, know your sign symbols, know where the sign started, work out where each planet actually was in that 360 degree circle. Even if you were familiar with that information, you'd need to look at every combination of every planet, and the fast moving ones you'd have to do almost on a daily basis. So it's no wonder why most people don't get stuck into Gann's real work, because it's just too much work to do. But what we've done is created what we call Aspectarian files. Now, all those calculations have been done for you. So on the left here, obviously we have the date. NM stands for new moon, and that can be important too. I won't get into the details in this video, but there's a small O when there's a new moon. Now, retrograde motion, I won't get into too much detail here, but again, retrograde is important, and we have the letter of the planet if it's in retrograde. So at the moment, on the 1st of August 1902, Jupiter, Saturn and Uranus are all in retrograde. And you can see here, Uranus ends its retrograde here because the U drops off the next day. Now, all the combinations of planets have been calculated. So you can see here, Venus and Mars was conjunct, so that is the same place in the sky. We see here that Jupiter and the Sun were at 174 degrees, and that's within 6 degrees of 180, which is an important negative aspect, or considered negative, so that's why it's highlighted red. We've got Jupiter and Pluto in a trine, which is 120 degrees, so it is within a 6 degree orb, that's why it's highlighted in green. And we've got Saturn and Mercury opposite. Now, there's obviously a lot of combinations, so if I scroll to the right, we see the rest of them for that day. So we've got Uranus and Pluto opposite, we've got Neptune and Mars conjunct or nearly conjunct, and you can see which direction they're going. They're actually moving away, so as if they're moving away, so it would have been in July when they were actually conjunct. And if we go to the right, you'll see all the combinations with the moon, and because that's the fastest moving, you'll see the color coding change, sometimes every day, sometimes every other or few days. So you can use these Aspectarians in a few ways, and it's called a geo-aspectarian because it's geocentric, which means it's looking from the Earth. We do actually have an helio-aspectarian, which are all the aspects pre-calculated if you were looking from the Sun. For this work, I find a lot of people use, or most people use, geocentric, but there are some that use heliocentric too, so that's why we've got two types. And what you can do is you can either scroll through this Aspectarian and look for important combinations, and then look to stock market charts to see if there was any important activity or turns around that time, or indeed you could look at various instruments, stock market, shares, commodities, currencies, etc., find important highs or lows, or indeed large price movements, because it's not always the exact high and low that you need to look for. It can often be a large price movement, and then you can look up the date in the Aspectarian files and to see if there were any important aspects influencing that movement. Now the files can be viewed in a browser or downloaded into a secure app for PC, mobile, iOS, Android. There's many platforms, and we've produced the data for 130 years, and it's been divided up into 30-year periods for the older data and smaller 10-year periods for the newer data, depending on how far people want to go back in their research, and of course if the instrument you're looking at actually, it may not go back to 1900, of course. Further information can be found on our website, elliottwaveasx.com, and there's also links in the description. Now back to WD Gann's most famous trade, which was on the 30th of September 1909. Now this is the Geo-Aspectarian for that day. We've got Venus-Neptune in a trine, Jupiter-Mars opposite, we've got Jupiter-Pluto squared, Saturn-Uranus squared, and Saturn-Neptune squared. We've got Uranus and Neptune opposite. If I scroll to the right, we've got Mars-Pluto squared, Mercury-Pluto in a trine. Now we've actually got the Saturn and the Moon coming into a conjunction, and the Moon's fast moving, so that's why the numbers change quickly. And then we've got Uranus Moon squared and Neptune Moon squared, and the Sun and Moon opposite. Now in a previous video I've shown what's called the Gann symbol, where we've got a grand square and a grand trine at the same time. But on the 30th of September 1909, this was the pattern. Now it's pretty confusing at first, but I've changed the lines so some are dotted, some are dashed. There's no meaning to that, that's just to make it a little bit easier to make the shapes out. On this date we've actually got two grand squares and a grand trine. Now I haven't actually seen Pallas and Chiron mentioned in Gann's work, but there's notes down the bottom about them. But I thought it'd be interesting to put them on the chart because they help form the second square, and of course Chiron actually helps form the grand trine. But the key is that there is a conjunction, a Saturn Moon, involving a trine, so it's squared to Neptune, trine Venus, and it's also squared Mercury. That's the key pattern. This video is part of a multi-part series, so please subscribe for future updates, including Elliott wave analysis. There are more articles covering, for example, the sunspot cycle on our website at elliottwaveasx.com, and more content is being added all the time. Links are in the description. Thanks for watching.